good. We will start. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our Climate Emergency Declaration meeting. We are MCAN. I think many of you know us very well. We're a statewide environmental organization founded in 2000, so we're a little over 20 years old. And a lot of our work focuses on our 50 plus chapters around the state, really trying to support the local action that they do and connect them with technical and legislative experts at the state level. And our theory of change is really focused a lot on this idea of local action, that it's within municipalities, within regions, that the really exciting, productive, fruitful climate action happens, social action in general happens, and it's our job as a statewide organization to support that and to uplift that. And I think climate emergency declarations are a really great municipal level tool. And by bringing people together around them and having this kind of peer sharing, we can really support groups looking to pass these kinds of declarations in their own communities. So before we begin, just to quickly talk about our speakers. So we have Lee Ketelsen from the Acton Climate Coalition. Green Acton, which is a part of the Acton Climate Coalition, is also an MCAN chapter. And then we also have Barry Magdalene and Fran Schofield from the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, which again is kind of a larger umbrella organization that includes the Cape Cod Climate Action Network, as well as the Cape Cod Emergency Declaration Initiative, which is really focusing on these climate emergency declarations. So we're going to have Lee talk and then have Barry and Fran talk and then open up for kind of Q&A and discussion. We really want this to be a space that is really supporting what you guys are interested in and the questions that you have as local advocates. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. Generally, if you have the answer to a question that you see in the chat, it's better to keep that till the end, so we're not distracting from the speakers and we can have a really great discussion at the end. So thank you all for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it over to Lee.
I think I have to unmute. I am going to share my screen also and just show you through the website, I hope, of the Acton Climate Coalition. Did that work? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm speaking for the Acton Climate Coalition, which didn't exist until about a year ago. The origin of the inspiration for us to build the coalition and do a climate emergency declaration came from some activists who had connected with the Climate Mobilization, which is a national group. If you haven't been on their website, you have to put the Climate Mobilization, and they've come out with a huge toolkit for doing this just this spring. So it's really worth checking out. And as it says here on the website, what they're pushing these declarations, they're not the only ones, but they're pushing these all around the country. And there's 1750 other governments. I think it's gone up since we updated this that have done these declarations. We started with Green Acton and a chapter of Mothers Out Front. We decided we wanted to do this. First, I'll mention why we wanted to do it. The one key reason is we wanted to do our part in this national effort and have local pressure pushing upwards to the federal government and the state government, knowing that what we really need is a massive federal mobilization. So all of these declarations are attempting to build that pressure. In Acton itself, we have a very environmental minded town, which we found out even more so, but we really seems, I think, everywhere. And in Acton, most people still view climate change as something that's happening in future decades, 2050, the end of the century, and really haven't caught up to the latest science which the youth are always talking about, and they're our model of how we really have to reduce our emissions drastically in the next 10 years. So we wanted to try to bring that message to the residents of Acton, and get some of the science out there. I think we didn't succeed so much on that, but I'll come back to that. And we also wanted to give a kick behind an already slowly moving local process. The town had already decided that it was going to do a climate action plan and had done a greenhouse gas inventory, but it was moving slowly, and we wanted to really give it a kick locally to have town meeting is powerful, as you know, in the town when it votes. So town meeting saying we have this urgent timeline and here's what we want our action plan to do was really important to us. And yes, as it says here, we did win. We had right before Labor Day, in the middle of pandemic, we had a special town meeting outside, and nearly unanimously, it says here, voted for it. It was about 400 to 10. So it's pretty close to everybody who came voted for it. And I'm going to talk about two main steps, two main things that we did simultaneously for building this. The first was to actually draft our declaration. Well, we did these simultaneously, but I'll talk about drafting our declaration. And that shows up on our website in green. We did start with the climate mobilization has a model declaration that nearly that exact declaration had already passed in Worcester. And I think it was the only one at the time that was a full declaration like that was Worcester. But we did change it a lot as we looked at it. First of all, we shortened it and simplified the language. And we did some quite a bit of studying on climate communication strategies and really got convinced that you need to pair the urgency with the optimism, basically. And so you'll see in our language, we put the subtitle, A Better Future Starting Now. We're trying to not scare off all the people while we're saying this is a very dire emergency. And we got advised by some communication studies that not only talk about what can be done, but that we're already on the way. This is a proven strategies. And so you see all this language about how we're already doing this in Massachusetts with many jobs in the clean energy sector. A lot of talk about our ability to build a prosperous economy and a thriving community. This isn't about deprivation. But importantly, we did keep the strength of there's a lot of whereases, which is a lot of the science that a lot of you are familiar with that you can read later. But in the therefore be it resolved, we wanted to keep some of the strength to it, and declaring a climate emergency is first. We also wanted to be clear that we need full-scale mobilization, as you see at the top here, trying to give people the parallel to World War II and how we can actually completely change our economy in 6 months if we want to. The other thing that we really debated, and I think we're one of the few that kept the model's 2030 target date for zero carbon emissions. And we did debate that nearly with everybody who came in touch with us. That's now 9 years away. However, we really believe, we feel that while it might be true that nationally and internationally, the climate may be livable if we reach 50% reduction by then. Here in prosperous Massachusetts, we felt we were more than our share responsible for the crisis. This is an economy in the US that has done more than our share per capita by far of causing this problem. And we're the ones with the societal riches to move faster. And Acton's the kind of community that should lead the way. So we kept with 2030. However, there is a caveat that we put in. Where is it? Yeah. So this is where, if you get to the middle here, we say we commit to a climate mobilization effort. And then we have this phrase, with appropriate support from the state and federal governments to bring net townwide carbon emissions to zero as quickly as possible with a target date of 2030. So that's our fudge factor. So we said to people, we think we need to get to zero by 2030, but we know as one town, we won't do it if we do it alone. We'll get as far as we can. We have to push everything we can, but we will need this federal mobilization to happen to reach this goal. And that worked. That worked with people. We didn't get too much pushback if we explained that. And that this declaration's purpose was to help build pressure for the federal mobilization is, and you hopefully know the climate mobilization and a lot of other groups are trying to get a climate emergency declaration, and not just a declaration, but emergency powers used by Biden to really move at the speed that we need to solve the climate crisis. So that worked for us. We believe in it. A lot of other people put other dates, but we stuck with that. Then the other thing that we did at the same time was build a coalition. We felt that was really key. And actually, right when we started, COVID hit. So we just started planning it, and then boom, we had to figure out, like everybody else, how to do this virtually. We started with, they're not listed in this way, but we started with some core groups, which I'll try to find, like besides our two environmental groups, we got our Sunrise chapter in our high school. That was another key. We got our Democratic Town Committee, which is big here. We have a large Indivisible chapter, which came in very strongly in support. And we got our League of Women Voter chapter, which is also strong here. But then with that core, and that's kind of the core that approved the declaration language, we went out and basically recruited endorsing organizations. And it was quite amazing. We were actually surprised at how many houses of worship wanted to do it. We have nearly every house of worship in town. Maybe we're missing one. And then we had a particular team that went to the small businesses in town. And we got just this amazing response. Just the individually owned small businesses really wanted in on this, to the point that they asked for posters to put in their windows to say that they declare a climate emergency and they endorse. It's just something that came out of them. So it's just something to think about. It gave us a lot more visibility. We have sort of it set up that the core group has a steering committee that can vote. We got our legislators, and it just kept growing over the last summer. The only other thing I guess I'll say is since we had to be virtual, we did create, there's a tape of what we said at town meeting on our website, which we only had 5 minutes to talk. We had all kinds of people prepared to answer the opposition, and then nobody spoke in opposition. So the question was called and we won. We also made a webinar, which we spent an awful lot of time on. And you're free. I can share any of the slides with you you want. There's a recording of it. We ran it. We held it many times over the summer and got small audiences every time. And then we recorded it and everybody put it in their newsletters. We don't know how many people actually got educated from that. And everything was virtual and really shut down. So the only other thing we did, we really wanted some visibility. So we went to yard signs and we made declare a climate emergency yard signs. We in town have a storehouse from one candidate of non-plastic metal cases that you could put paper signs in. That was very popular. I was in charge of getting those around, and the church, we didn't have enough for all the churches and the businesses that wanted one in front of their place. So I think that led some people to our website. So I'll just show you, we have some people who love to put resources. If you want to read any, if you haven't, look at this, anything you may want to know, we have here. So just point that out. But we did win. I won't go into what we're doing now because of the time, but we are using it to move on to stronger action in town. Done.
Great, thank you so much, Lee.
I have to unscreen share. Yes, stop share. Did it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. That's really great to hear. And so now I will pass it to Barry and Fran.
Thanks, Rose. Thank you, Lee. So our climate emergency initiative started in January of 2020 when I was serving as chair of the 350 Cape Cod node. We had a longstanding regional node of 350 here. And my view was that we really needed to be more rooted at the town level, because most of what government does that matters on the Cape is done at the town level, as in probably most communities. And that the way to do that was to launch a campaign at the level of town meetings. And 350 decided to go ahead and try to launch that. And one of our first steps was to reach out to the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, which was a very broad coalition that reached from 350 to the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, which is a venerable old environmentalist organization on the Cape, to the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and Cape Cod 5, which is our leading local bank, and Habitat for Humanity, a wide range of folks who have shared a commitment to work towards net zero objectives on the Cape. And 350 hadn't been particularly well connected to that coalition. We immediately hit it off, and the collaborative agreed to co-sponsor the initiative. And we began reaching out to folks in the 15 towns on the Cape to put it on the town meeting warrants for the spring of 2020, and found folks in all 15 towns to carry the petitions. Wide range of folks did it, from people involved in the Faith Communities Environmental Network, which is a coalition of congregations on the Cape that had organized under the auspices of the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative to work on climate issues. 350 activists in various towns put it on the warrant in all the towns, and of course then COVID hit. So changed our tactical approach. In a lot of towns, it got postponed from the Springtown meetings to the fall. In some towns, including mine of Yarmouth, got postponed again because of COVID, and so it's coming up this spring. It's passed so far in 12 of the 15 towns. We expect it'll wind up passing in all of the towns. But my own view of this, somebody asked at the beginning, why do it? My view was that the reason to pass these emergency declarations was because it immediately raises the question of now what? What do we do next in this town to deal with the emergency? And it's been a rolling process in all the towns. So in some towns, the main things that the climate action networks that this morphed into. So the folks who started the climate emergency petitions in each town were encouraged to organize a town-based climate action network. It's still a work in progress. Some of them are vibrant, some of them are works in progress. But in some towns, they are holding webinars, trying to bring in more people to educate about climate. In a couple of towns this spring, we're bringing up bylaws to require the towns to begin immediately, when they add new town vehicles or replace vehicles, to buy electric vehicles. And when they start a new town building project, to evaluate a net zero design option. We are hoping by the end of the year to be ready to launch in all the towns a project to encourage residents to adopt green energy strategies, basically promote solar power, electric vehicles, strategic electrification, air source heat pumps, the whole range of green strategies that are most of the emissions issues in town. Town governments have already on the Cape been doing a fair amount of installing solar power and converting town consumption of electricity to renewable sources, but most of the consumption is ours. And so the major project is to create outreach campaigns in every town to encourage people and assist them to actually make the transitions to solarizing their houses and switching to electric vehicles, and installing chargers, and making sure they've done the home energy audits and energy improvements that can make their homes more efficient, and trying to do the same thing on the commercial and industrial side. We've realized that there are probably literally hundreds of acres of commercial and industrial rooftops and parking lots that are just sitting there waiting for solar, and it'll actually make them money. And so we're working on a strategy to work with the Chamber of Commerce to get businesses that haven't done it to start thinking about how they can monetize their roofs with solar power. So that the purpose of the emergency declaration strategy was to get to the other side of it, and then talk with folks about what do we do about it. That's where we are now. Fran, you want to? You might be muted, Fran, or
well, I think I am just trying to find my documents. Here they are. Let's see. I apologize for. Barry, you can keep talking while I secure my files.
Okay. So I think for me, two takeaways were both that the work of actually building an active organization in every town is an ambitious project. There are towns now where there are self-sustaining groups that are figuring out on their own, and everybody, and each of them they're each autonomous, coming up with different strategies. And the umbrella of the climate change collaborative has been really powerful in terms of giving us the capacity to aim high. So the program that I was describing, which tentatively is Energize the Cape and Vineyard, is the program that's going to promote solar power, electric vehicles, energy efficiency at the level of every household. It is a massive undertaking, and through the collaborative, we are getting the support of the Cape Light Compact, which is we don't have municipal utilities on the Cape. We have a single entity that is a joint venture of all 15 towns on the Cape and the 6 towns on Martha's Vineyard, that is the default electric service for all households on the Cape and the Vineyard. And they've offered to step in to manage the program and fund it. And those and Cape Cod 5, which is part of the collaborative, is going to be our, a financing partner to help people actually buy it with low interest loans. It has been, a great experience becoming part of this wider coalition that represents a really diverse range of interests. That is, I recommend the strategy of broadening beyond the usual suspects.
Well, I'm having difficulty bringing up my documents for whatever reason. But I wanted to talk about the, the sort of the steps that were involved that that helped communicate, publicize, promote, and activate. Barry mentioned the initial coalition, and that was important. He came to us. We didn't know Barry, just a little bit over a year ago with this proposal. And immediately it was aligned with the mission of the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative. And our mission is to reach carbon neutrality or net zero on Cape Cod and the islands by enhancing communication, collaboration, and activism among organizations, programs, and individuals committed to mitigating the climate crisis. So this was right up our alley. It was like, oh goodness, this is the person who's bringing us a mechanism for helping folks at the local level advance the mission. So one of the first things we did, and I will provide all of the documents, and I have to Rose and Sarah, and she'll make these available to you. One of the first things we did, the founder of the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative is a fellow named Rich Delaney. He's been an environmental leader for 40 years, and he's a civic and environmental leader on Cape Cod, president of the Center for Coastal Studies, and had gone to the Paris Climate Accord with John Kerry in his capacity as a student scientist and planner for oceans. And the climate crisis he's been long aware of it before many of us had awakened to it. He came back from Paris, and he was so inspired by what was going on. He said, we need to start something here on the Cape. And that was Climate Accord was 2015. 2016 was when we established our organization. So Rich is very well known on the Cape, well known and respected. And when Barry came to us with this idea, one of the first things he said, and he had these connections, and I would suggest for others considering this is a good place to start. He arranged for an editorial board meeting with the Cape Cod Times, and Barry and people from APCC, myself, Rich, others from the collaborative attended and made the case for these declarations of climate emergency. Shortly thereafter, the Cape Cod Times, which is the primary it's the primary newspaper on Cape Cod, issued a press release endorsing these declarations of climate emergency. So that was like our first really public endorsement of this initiative. And as Barry said, and I was trying to remember Barry, but MCAN was and did the climate action networks, I think the initiative came first, and then mass can, we were going to have our first, like, how to develop cans with your predecessor, Sarah, and then COVID hit and we weren't able to do it. But it was kind of like hand in hand, the declarations and the establishment of cans on all 15 towns in Cape Cod. So this was a huge undertaking, which others of you, I think you're, maybe focused on, individual towns, or, maybe a couple of towns, but to get, the 15 communities organized during COVID was an enormous feat. So what we've done since is, and I have examples of our declaration of climate emergency, and the actual petitions, so you can look and see what they look like. And, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And Barry, I think, was instrumental in crafting our petition, which most communities used almost in toto, but we're like little city states on the Cape, and so every town is different, and so and this is okay, that's fine, it's the way, but the politics are different, and so different communities would tweak their petition. But basically it comported with the original declaration. Now, to have had 12 communities essentially pass these resolutions under, having town meetings and parking lots and so forth was quite an accomplishment, and other communities will be following suit. But what we did we do a newsletter, the climate Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative newsletter, and I invite you all to sign up for it. We include information on, global, national, state, local, regional levels. So it's not specific to Cape Cod, although we do have a Cape Cod component, and with impunity, we include MCAN webinars and trainings and so forth. And we find MCAN, enormously helpful to us. But, we use that channel as a way to first announce the initiative. And we have a 2,200 member audience, so from all across the Cape and the islands and so forth. So that we use that to get the word out. And then as communities succeeded, we would continue to get the word out, passed in Bourne, passed in Brewster, so it gave encouragement to other communities. What I would say, I happen to live in Brewster, and one of the consequences of the initiative, which our petition did not mandate, and Barry, you could, maybe speak to the details of this. It didn't mandate action, but what happened as a result of the petition being submitted in Brewster is our select board unanimously issued a net zero and climate crisis resolution directing all town offices and employees to consider net zero effects and climate mitigation effects in all of their decision making. And that's, that is a direct, and that does have teeth. So, and but that is a direct result of the passage of the declaration. So I have all sorts of documents that
Yeah. And so
I can't find them. I
it's
can't but if Rose, if you would share them and also share links to our newsletter. And we love to hear stories, and it doesn't have to be, from Cape Cod, but we love to hear like success stories because it models what other communities are doing for our own region. So I would invite you to, to be in touch with us on that. So.
Yeah. So we'll be sharing out all of those resources that Fran
Okay.
sent to me, yeah, which includes the petitions, the actual text of the Brewster Emergency Declaration, press coverage, links to sign up for the newsletter, and all sorts of stuff, as well as a link to the Acton website and some other sample climate emergency declarations. You mentioned the one in Worcester. There's also actually a really interesting one from Portland, Maine as well. So all of that will be sent out along with notes from this, the chat, and the recording after this meeting. So I think now, if we want to transition over to any questions that people may have. Yeah, John.
Hi, thank you. A very specific question, which is that Lee mentioned we've been for our Brookline Green Electricity Program. Our main advertisement has been lawn signs, and it's the plastic corrugated lawn signs, which are not recyclable. We don't like that. And Lee, you mentioned that you had some kind of metal sign frame that you were able to put cardboard or paper or something inside. Where did you get them, and how do they work in the rain and the snow and that kind of question?
I was one of our selectmen who's actually my neighbor. He ran for office and he's very green. So he got these metal A-frames. I'd have to get his source, but we reuse them for all kinds of things. They're expensive, but if you're going to keep campaigning in town, you just take paper in and out of a slot. Well, they work great. We did have a little leakage in a heavy rain, so we're going to have to tape it up better. But once you buy them, you just have to have a place to store them and reuse them, and you don't have to use plastic ever again in yard signs.
You're on mute, Rose. We cannot hear you. Yes.
Sorry, my bad. So Paul has his hand up, and then Rose after him.
Thanks. Before I my question on lawn signs. So here in Lincoln, for a different campaign, somebody recently found a way to avoid the plastic. So you imagine the U-shaped metal piece and a coated cardboard sign that folds over it. Put some staples on it so it doesn't blow off. I could try to find who that supplier was, but for the same reason, somebody figured that out. My question was going to be, I guess I could take the Acton example. There's always the question about, are we just going to stop with the declaration or beef it up by adding some meaty actual commitments? There's obviously pros and cons, right? Commitments make it hard to question, also make it more impressive. So I think we could take the Acton example. In theory, I guess there's things that Acton could do or my town could do that we don't have to wait on state and federal help to do. Like, at least we can make our own stuff that we control net zero by 2030, whatever, right? I guess that might include, buying 100% renewable electricity for the town buildings, converting all the town vehicles to electric vehicles, things like that. How do you interpret the Acton resolution as what it intends to say about that?
Yeah, so I kind of brushed over it, but our town had already decided it was going to do a climate action plan, and it was hiring a sustainability director. And so we see the resolution as putting a time frame and a town meeting urgency to that plan. And it's worked out pretty well because our town manager is supportive, and he uses it against anyone else, sort of, not to get him in trouble, but he's
Mhm.
like, well, town meeting says our plan, because we're going out to get a consultant now to actually help us in the process of developing our plan. And it's keeping the selectmen and the town manager and all of them focused on us reaching 2030. So that's our goal. And we're going to be pushing all kinds of policies along. Our next one is what related to what MCAN is working on, and we're going to be trying to petition the legislature so we can ban fossil fuel hookups for all new construction.
Right.
And then be ready to adopt the stretch code we want fossil fuel free stretch code. But we've
Right.
got a lot of other things in the works. Our town already has just built a twin school and a fire station that have no fossil fuel hookups and are net zero. So I
Wow.
said we were already starting that way, but we
Right.
wanted to keep the momentum. And so there's a lot of, we're geared up to do, we really do believe in government action, and we are going to fight for support. We're doing the kind of resident support program that Barry mentioned that's called Energize, Mass Energize, and you set up resources for people to take their own action. But we're not a particularly rich town, and we're making it clear that a lot of these things are going to be we know are going to be too expensive for everyone to do on our own. So that's where you end up needing the state and federal resources to help people make these transitions to all the new technologies. But
Sure,
yeah,
but putting aside the residential, just in terms of town businesses, town operations, right? With the town budget paid
yeah,
for.
the town
The people who
operation.
voted for this understood that it's going to be net zero by 2030.
Yeah,
Cool.
not
you.
just town operations. It's supposed to be everybody in town, the
I
entire.
understand. I'm just taking one bite at
Yeah.
a time. The part that you don't have the excuse to wait for state and federal help on.
Right,
Yeah.
you know, and we haven't done it yet, but it's what we voted for. So the next things will be about, you know, how we get all the municipal buildings to net zero.
Right.
And, you know, a big ticket item is going to be the massive number of school buses that go in our town, you know.
Right.
I actually am a climate emergency coach for Montgomery County, Maryland. And they did manage to get all electric buses for their entire county. So there's a lot that cities and towns can do, and counties.
Thank you.
Great. And then Rose?
This seems silly after Paul's very good question and Lee's very meaty answer. But one more thought on plastic signs. If you already have them, you can reuse them. We went to all of the local transfer stations and asked for any paint that was left over when people brought away paint, and we've repainted and used stencils and repainted them for future campaigns.
Awesome. So I think we probably have time for one more question, if anyone else has anything they'd like to ask. If not, then yeah, Sarah.
So I just want to say this has been really, really interesting to hear Lee, Barry, and Fran. Really interesting because there are some really strong similarities, right? And so what I heard this evening included, number one, coalitions are key. You know, Lee started talking about, so we went to look at a template, but while we're thinking about language, we are developing and mobilizing folks on the ground to build a base, to build a coalition. Barry and Fran both recognized that in a completely different context, right? So many towns to mobilize, that some kind of umbrella organization was really important to increase capacity and to help spread the word. So that is really one striking similarity. Another similarity I heard was about communication, having a strategy to communicate with different parts of your base, with different parts of the Cape and different parts of stakeholders in Acton. And it seems like a newsletter or something like a newsletter is really, really important to share information, to help garner support. And so a newsletter is not only just a one-way communication tool, invite people to provide feedback, and use it as a part of mobilizing folks on the ground. Then I also think there are such drastic differences, sort of a regional mobilization around declaring climate emergencies town by town across the entire Cape. This is a massive undertaking. And I think it really required, in listening to both Barry and Fran, really intentional cooperation with a lot of people. Similar in Acton, but the scope is a little, we're just looking at one municipality. And I think it's, these are both really powerful case studies. And so those two similarities, building your coalition, sharing resources, trying to increase your capacity in any way you can, and really clearly communicating what you're doing, and staying in contact with key stakeholders. And those include local decision makers for sure. And I really appreciated the emphasis on the financial folks and the small business owners. That is really key. And again, those yard signs, that's a communication tool. And the flyers, that's a communication tool. So making the declaration really visible and easily locatable throughout the Cape and throughout town. That, that was really great to hear. And if folks have other, yes, Fran.
One thing I forgot to mention at the outset, we worked with a graphic designer to create a logo for the Cape-wide Climate Emergency Declaration Initiative, but it could be and was adapted by individual communities, because there's nothing better than a like a symbol, and of course I can't show it to you, but it is on that material that Sarah and Rose will share with you also. But it's I think that helps too, as opposed to just a bunch of words, having a brand for your effort is, and then you use it everywhere.
Yeah,
Thank you.
a great point. And then Kathy, do you have a last question or comment?
Oh, okay. This has been great, and I have to look at the recording because there's so much information. I just was curious. So we've been going back and forth about having outside groups versus just keeping it all local on our support page on our website. We've got climate resolution, we've got churches and local folks. We do have ECA, Elders Climate Action, because there's several of members there. I haven't asked Sarah or what the process would be to get some kind of support from MCAN, since we are a chapter of that. But I was curious what especially Acton, because you're a small town like us, what you felt would, are people who are like not really into this, so they get suspicious that, well, it's some kind of, outside groups and progressive organizations from outside our town, or
We did have that. I know,
Yeah.
we had that thought. We decided not to go for and put a big list of environmental groups, because it's like, ours was all local, except if you were like Elders Climate Action, we had members here. So we decided to try to pad it with as many, churches and local businesses and League of Women Voters and people, all the other types of groups that exist in town. We tried to get things like the garden club. We have a big garden club, but they won't endorse things like that. But we did get to the point where they would put it in their stuff in their newsletter about it. So, because we had a couple of our members on the board of those. So there are other groups that we tried, but just they wouldn't go political, you know.
Okay.
But we did get enough, and we were surprised. Like I said, the businesses, I don't know, I'd like to see if that happens everywhere else, but the small businesses really just seem to decide that this was in their interest to jump on board and make it visible, which really helped.
And Lee, what about like your senior center? I mean, departments within the town, is that something that they even want to be involved in, or is it too political for the town?
The senior center wouldn't endorse or anything, but they held our webinar for their members.
Oh,
So that helped. And now now that we're underway and we have the town meeting having voted for this, it really did change sort of like what the town can say they officially do. So this Energize site that we're doing in this program, the town is going to pay the fees for it, and the sustainability manager is going to run it and feature it in all their things. So it's turned it into a little more of a sort of public and community and government collaborative going forward.
okay. Can I one last question? Is that what kinds of negative comments did you find were the most hard to take? Just so we're ready for it.
We had this one guy who's our kind of resident climate denier come on every single webinar so that he could make a statement at the end about how the science really didn't show any increased warming and blah, 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 didn't really have a lot of effect. It was funny, we had people worried that we were gonna cut off their wood stoves. We had 2 or 3 people. Does this mean we can't have a wood stove? And we're like, we're not worried about your wood stove. This is a bigger, you know, so yeah. But I think we actually had an advantage of it being COVID and people couldn't get in our face very much. So we didn't, and then we were expecting them all. We do have them, you know, we have 1/3 of our town votes for Trump. We thought we'd get a big pushback in town meeting. But I think they gave up. They knew that this was clearly going to win, and it was, they didn't stay around to debate us. For some, you know, these resolutions get put at the end of town meeting, and they generally are people who leave before the end of town meeting. So we didn't get a lot, but just the usual climate change is a hoax, and, you know, you're trying to do this, you're trying to shut down our wood stove for nothing, and sort of things like that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it's 6:04, so I'm gonna wrap things up. But thank you all so much for coming. I think we may have lost Barry, but thank you to him and Lee and Fran for all coming. I think you might have had something right after this. As we mentioned, I'll be sending out the recording, the chat transcript, all of the many resources that were mentioned throughout the webinar, and the notes. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your
Thanks for doing this, MCAN, Rose and Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
It's great.
Yeah,
Take
great.
care, everybody. Have a
Nice to-
lovely evening.
Nice to meet everyone.